Hey, Brian Manning here, Noah Dalzell alongside. Celtics beat the Jazz after a massive fourth quarter comeback attempt by Utah here. Jason Tatum out, Kristaps Porzingis still out with the illness for his seventh game, as well as Al Horford, who got a rest night outside of a back-to-back here after some phenomenal performances from him last week. So another win for the Celtics shorthanded. They've done that in 3 of their last 4 here. And the opportunity now to go into that Oklahoma City matchup on Wednesday, a massive game, I feel like, by regular season standards, especially after the Thunder walloped Boston and Oklahoma City earlier this year, pretty much wire to wire in that game. This is an important one for Boston, just from the sense of showing that they can match up with this team that looks like they're about as well suited as any to beating them in the finals.
Yeah, there's going to be a big buzz in this building. You can already tell that this crowd has gotten up for the big games, whether it was the Nuggets, the Cavs, the Lakers most recently. A lot of fun games on this homestand. I think the reality is that there's a good chance Jalen Williams doesn't play. He left the game early tonight with a hip injury. Even if they come out flat and whatever, I think it could become a big story, but it's not necessarily going to deflate their confidence going into the
That's where
playoffs.
I feel differently about this one. The one thing they can't do on Wednesday is get destroyed again. Because then you're starting to wonder about the matchup. You're starting to wonder if this is a team that has your number a little bit. And it's so far down the road. And you remember me asking Jalen Williams at All-Star about it. Just feels like this is inevitable as a finals matchup. And usually when we start thinking that, it doesn't go that way. But the Thunder is so damn good. And the Celtics are starting to look like they're in a bit of a class of their own in the East, too.
Well, I wouldn't say that, just because the Cavs do have an 8-game lead over them or a 7-game lead over them.
I like them against the Cavs, but that's a topic.
No, I mean,
for
I would
another
pick
day.
them against the Cavs too, but I just want to, out of respect for the Cavs, I do think
they deserve respect.
If you're looking at the standings, the crash course looks like it's between OKC and the Cavs, because they're the two teams that have been on this kind of regular season tear. I think the Celtics are going to make it there. And you're right. I mean, I always go back to the Nuggets last year where there was a lot of momentum around those two teams facing off. Obviously, that didn't happen. Obviously, the Celtics lost both of those games. I remember Kristaps Porzingis being asked about it, like them having their number, and he was like, that's not how we feel. I think professional athletes that have won a championship and that have been dominated and beaten great players and great teams are not going to be overwhelmed regardless of what happens on Wednesday. But certainly, I think you want to make sure that this Thunder defense that did shut them down, like they shut them down probably the only time this year that I've really felt like the Celtics were shut down more so than the Celtics played poorly on their own. This was really the OKC's doing in that game in Oklahoma in, what was it, January?
Yep.
You don't want that same thing to happen. And I would be very surprised if it did, because ultimately they have that film and they're going to respond accordingly. And I think that if they had another half to tack on to that game, they would have responded better in that game as well. Part of the problem is that it all kind of happened in the second half and time ran out. But yeah, this is as highly anticipated as a game's going to be in March. And it very well could be the finals preview. Probably will be if I had to pick a matchup right now.
So keys to the game for me, 2 things I'm thinking about from that last one. The Celtics tried to play straight up on gilgeous-alexander, and it didn't work well, especially switching. Remember in that game, Peyton Pritchard got played off the floor for the most part because of Shea going at him. So I don't think that's something you can allow to happen again. I think there's going to have to be one of those Jalen games where he's shadowing him like he did against Luka. I think that's the approach you have to take. And if you want to save that for the finals or whenever you meet them down the line, a more serious setting, and want to just try some stuff here, I get that. But to me, that's mandatory against the Thunder. You have to take Shea out. You have to force the other guys to beat you. I know they did that late in that game with Lou Dort, but I think he's just such a devastating one-on-one player that if you're going to try to play him straight up, he's going to beat it more often than not, just like Tatum.
Right, and I think that Oklahoma City has some great players around him, but the disparity between him and the next guys is large enough to overreact to him. Like
I put
on
Tatum
the Celtics,
on him. I put Brown on him.
And so here's the thing. I was going to say this. So not the most recent game, but the game last year in Oklahoma City. If you remember that game, Oklahoma kind of had control of that one, and the Celtics almost made a fourth quarter comeback, and a big part of that was Jason Tatum matching up with Shea, 3/4 court, making his life miserable, and it worked. Like, it worked for that stint. And we never saw it again because then Shea didn't play in Boston when they came there last spring, and then this past winter, in Oklahoma, we didn't see that matchup very much. So I don't think Joe's going to pull it out, because right now, I do think there's this balance of like trying things out but also showing your hand. I think Mark Daigneault, like his philosophy has been, especially because they've had this massive lead in the standings, is that they're trying everything. And he's talked about it openly, that they're using this time to experiment, but they're also a younger team that needs to do that. I think Joe's going to be more comfortable sitting on different schemes or tools than Mark is. We'll see. We very well might see all of a sudden, like I think in the finals, I would love to see Tatum take that matchup, because it just seems like he's been well suited for it. Jalen hasn't had the same level of success against Shea as he had against other stars. It doesn't mean that he can't get it, and I think that, he maybe hasn't had one of those nights where he's super locked in. We'll see. But I think it's a tool that they have that they probably won't use much on Wednesday, but probably will if the time comes in June.
And no Jalen Williams, if that's the case. Secondary
lot,
creator for them gone, and they don't have many creators beyond Shea, Casey Wallace, and a few others there potentially. But the big addition for the Thunder is Chet Holmgren, who didn't play in that game, and gives them a double big dynamic that could challenge Boston's desire to go in that direction. Porzingis, of course, probably going to be up in the air for this game with the illness, so the Celtics might have to play smaller this time around. It's a much different dynamic than the last game, and it seems like the Celtics bench is getting back to itself too, and they were just a complete no-show in that game. So those are the things you're looking at, lineup matchups, the way both teams are going to play stylistically, as well as the benches. Because in my mind, I think Oklahoma City's bench dominated Boston's in that one, especially when you start to think about the Wiggins and the Isaiah Joes and those type of guys. They're deep, and there are a lot of dangerous guys off that bench, shooters especially. And Lou Dort, you thought you could leave that guy open, and
you shouldn't. He's a great shooter this year. So, yeah, I think like some of those guys historically, their career numbers just
mallet fingers tomorrow as well.
Oh yeah, is he still dealing with the mallet finger?
I don't know, but yeah.
We got to check it out pregame in the locker room to see if how Lou Dort's setup looks, because I thought Drew looked pretty comfortable tonight. But we'll see how that shapes up. But this will be a good one, and you could tell there was not as much juice in this building for Celtics Jazz. I think this was a pretty slow game for most of the night, but this crowd's waiting for that kind of game, and Wednesday will definitely be one of those.
Again, you're gonna try stuff, lineups, guys are in and out, but you just can't get blown out the way you did on Wednesday. We'll be talking about that.
I'll be very surprised if they get.
It's a tough matchup for them. So I think they'll compete. I think they have the potential to win this game the way they're playing right now, and Jalen Williams does potentially hurt their Oklahoma City as well. So we'll have updates on all this. Kristaps Porzingis still dealing with that injury. We talked about that in another video here. For Noah Dalzell, I'm Bobby Manning. Celtics beat the Jazz tonight, but that's just an appetizer for the game of the week. Celtics-Thunder. I hear Joe Sway's going to be here.
It's the word on the street.
I'm excited. That's a big-time return game. You thought Shvee was big here tonight. Joe Sway's coming back to TD Garden on Wednesday, so we'll have coverage of that and much more for the rest of the season here on CLNS Media, Celtics All Access. And subscribe, like, rate, all of that, and we'll talk to you on Wednesday for Celtics-Thunder.
Shout out to our sponsor, PrizePicks. Guys, download the app today and use the code CLNS to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. Again, that's the code CLNS to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game.